Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about meltdowns, specifically how they affect me. I was asked by Heed My Demands if I would explain that in detail, so I forgot about that memory till just now. I just went out in the hallway and just put my back to the wall and just slid down and just cried and screamed, and they had to send me home, and I didn't have to explain anything to her. I can't promise I don't delete this video. This is a video that was asked for by Heed My Demands if I would talk about how meltdowns affect me. So I thought I would do this topic while my son is still out of town and I still have his room to record here. This is kind of a new diagnosis when you've lived 40 years of your life not knowing you have autism and then you're diagnosed. I want to say that I have just two moods. That is consistent Jenny, and the other is meltdown Jenny. So the truth is I want consistency in my life, and that includes my emotions. And as we know, that is just not always possible. I can't control my environment many times, especially in public. And, I can only control my emotions to a point before I can't control it anymore. As a child, I can remember there were times that I would erupt into emotions, run into my room, throw myself on the bed, just crying hysterically, even at the age of 9 and up. I don't remember it affecting me for days, like it does seem to for some others on the spectrum. So I imagine we even experience meltdowns differently as autistic people. I was usually able to shake it off later in the day, the meltdowns that I experienced. I did find a meltdown caught on tape, probably post-meltdown. My dad was recording as my brother's birthday. I don't remember what happened. I ran to my room. I was crying. He came in there and he was going to film, but I noticed the red light was on. So after he, told me to calm down and try to go back to the birthday party, I was able to go back to the birthday party, but I was not the same. So basically, when life is going easy for me, I can stay away from meltdowns. When life becomes difficult or out of control, they seem to happen more. Meltdowns are more notable for me as an adult because that's more recent in my life. I did mention in my last video about having a little meltdown in school, in high school, about that situation in my last video. But meltdowns for me seem to be when it feels like all the emotions that are whatever is going on at that time, I just can't handle it anymore. I have to run away and just, throw myself on the bed, crying uncontrollably, close and lock my door. At the worst times, throw things. And I haven't thrown anything in a long time. I remember when my son was little, having a meltdown where I was throwing a few things. I was so overwhelmed with emotions. That was when I was in my bedroom with the door shut. My first husband, we didn't have a very good relationship. That's my daughter's dad. And we were both very immature. And I think now that he was also autistic. And if he would we would get into an argument and I would want to call home because I lived hundreds of miles away when we were married. And he would take the phone and snatch it out of my hand. And I would end up throwing things and yelling and running to the room crying. And it was just a bad situation. So that was a time in my life that I had to get on antidepressants. At the time, I felt like to mellow my moods when I was married to him because it was so awful at the time. Now that marriage did not last. We were married for many years until we got divorced. We just were not able to communicate at all. My dad would make comments like, "What do you see in him? Do you just feel sorry for him?" Because my dad thought he wasn't very smart. So I did get married again to another guy. His name was Charles, and I felt like I married him to escape my situation. I was living at home with my mom, and we get along wonderfully when we don't live together, but when we live together, we don't. And I think it was my way of wanting to get out of the house. So I thought I loved him, and I married him and moved to the area where I am now, which is again hundreds of miles away from where my home was. I was never able to communicate with Charles very well, and I felt like I didn't have any control in that relationship. He was very controlling. If we would get into an argument, and I really don't even remember what things we argued about. It's like I've tried to push that out of my head. But I would run to our bedroom and slam the door, go in the closet, and just sit in the dark and cry. So that was a meltdown for me. And it happened many times, and he never consoled me or tried to help me, and it made it worse because he didn't seem to care. But my daughter had to witness all these things. Now, she was still young, probably 7, 8, or 9, and she would see me being so unhappy. And at one particular meltdown, we had an argument in the car, and as soon as we got to the house, I ran out of the car and ran into the bedroom, slammed the door, and jumped on the bed in the dark. So I'm laying there sobbing, and my daughter comes in, and she brings this, which was from her room, and she sets it on the floor in the dark. And the lights off of it were just beautiful displays of lights on the ceiling. It was the most beautiful thing ever. My daughter was trying to help me in her own way. And that's why I've kept that carousel, because of that situation where when it felt like nobody cared, she did. It was a very hard time in my life. I didn't understand my emotions. I was very unhappy at my job, and the only good thing in my life at that point was my daughter. Gee, where is this emotion coming from? I don't know. I haven't thought about that in a long time. Ultimately, he was the one that, asked for the divorce. So that was a hard time in my life, and I stayed in the town. I did not move back home for whatever reason. I did have a job. Um, my daughter was in school. I didn't want to yank her out of school, and we stayed. So I ended up dating a guy named Darren, and he just treated me, wonderfully. The best to that point I had ever been treated. And I thought things were going really good until his ex-girlfriend came back into his life, and he chose to break up with me. Now, I had just gone through a divorce, and I probably had not dealt with it. I probably had not dealt with emotions. I should have gotten counseling. And so I was hinging everything as far as happiness on that relationship. And when he broke up with me, I remember I couldn't take it. So I sat in my bedroom. I think my daughter was at a friend's house because I don't remember her being there. But somehow I had gotten a knife, and I was just really just cutting on my wrist, but I didn't really want to die, you know what I mean? I was just trying to numb the pain, and that was the first time I had ever just cut on myself, and it was a dull knife. But somehow the police got called. My ex-husband showed up, and I was just sitting there on the floor, just I couldn't really talk, to the policeman. He kept asking me all these questions, and he was in my space, and he was threatening to send me off to the hospital, to the psychiatric unit, and he said if I didn't give him my social security number that I would have to go. And I wasn't really talking to him, but when he said that, that was more horrifying to me, to end up at the psych unit than to give him my social security number. So I did, and my ex-husband agreed to stay at the house to monitor me, and so the police officer left. Now, I kept the door shut, and my ex-husband stayed in the other room, but, he never tried to help me or seemed to care about, I don't know what he thought, but it was just one of the worst times of my life. And I was glad my daughter was not there to see any of that going on. I don't remember how I got through that. I was going to counseling, I was on medications, and I probably was not able to go into work for a few days because I couldn't have masked for the residents. There was no way. I made it through. So fast forward, I have been happily married to my husband, Jeff, for 16 years, and we are so much alike. Honestly, I have had meltdowns, especially at the beginning of our marriage, of this relationship. I remember if we got into it, I would usually just run into the bedroom, slam the door, lock the door, throw myself on the floor by the bed. I would throw things sometimes. He would, yell for me to open the door. He would threaten to pry the door open with a screwdriver. And this also makes me remember locking the door when I was a kid at home and my dad, yelling at me to unlock the door. I forgot about that memory till just now. Honestly, just might delete this video if I do post it. I don't know. This wonderful guy that I'm married to now, Jeff, my husband, he loves me very much, and he just didn't want to see me in anguish like I was. I would have many meltdowns just in his arms at times, and he cared enough to just hold me and help me through it. I felt like a letdown for my son, who was little. He was like toddler years when I was still having those kind of meltdowns. My son didn't understand, why mommy was so sad, and he wanted to help me. Holidays, I have had meltdowns. When I'd be with my family, as an adult, if I get in an argument with my brother, I would run and lock myself in the bathroom crying, or run and jump on the bed and want to be in a dark, quiet room by myself. And I'm sure my family, this before my diagnosis, didn't understand why I would seem so probably dramatic to them. So, even up to the Christmas before this last Christmas, I had a meltdown during Christmas and had to go to the bedroom. But at this time, I had diagnosis. So my mom, she just came in there very sweetly and just patted me on the back, and she understood. And I didn't have to explain anything to her. Because she knew. But my mom understood, and she gave me time. And I was able to come back out and enjoy the rest of Christmas, understanding I knew what was going on to myself and giving myself a little grace and mercy through it. So I know holidays can be so stressful, which is why this last Christmas I had holiday Christmas at my house, because I could control the factors more. I could control the situations. I knew what I needed to do this past Christmas because of my diagnosis. I knew how it needed to be handled. And I made a whole video on that because it really helped. It really did. And it was the best Christmas I had had in a really long time. I've had some meltdowns on jobs at work, and I have a video on that also. I'm so emotional today, I just don't want to go through all of that again. But I've had some major meltdowns at a couple of jobs, and a lot of times it just depended on the bosses I had, how they treated me, or what the situation was. I was fired from a job, when I was in my early 20s, and that was very traumatic. I had a meltdown because of that. Because for someone who doesn't like to get in trouble, being fired is like the worst thing ever. That was very traumatic. I didn't think I'd ever recuperate from that. I lost so much self-esteem. I ended up going back to college and majoring in psychology, and I think it was really just to understand myself and understand people. So I finished that degree because I love school and I like doing papers, and it's focusing on details and tasks, and I can handle that. So I finished my college degree, and then I went out into the workforce and tried to be a case manager. And my first job as a case manager, it went okay for a while. You're helping people. I was working at the mental health center with people with schizophrenia and major depressive disorder and all kinds of mental disorders. Yet I had one myself. I didn't realize it at the time, but there was a lot of positive experiences in that. When one of my clients threatened to commit suicide in my office, he downed a whole bottle of pills, and I didn't know what to do. I ran across from my office to the therapist's office, and I was pointing at my office, and he had to go in there, and I just went out in the hallway and just put my back to the wall and just slid down and just cried and screamed, and they had to send me home. And he was apologizing. The guy who was downing the pills, I think I shocked him, really. It shocked me too. I just couldn't handle being a case manager. I took on other people's problems. But I ultimately ended up leaving the job because of the boss I had. I just didn't connect with, and I even thought she just didn't like me at all. I couldn't stay there. I wasn't happy anymore. So I left. I did try to be a social worker one more time at another job, and I worked for the government as a social worker, or it was called case manager. And I just couldn't connect with anybody as far as my coworkers. I always felt like the outsider, and I I called it at the time. I had a nervous breakdown because I didn't know what was happening to me. So the caseload was getting overwhelming for me, and they were adding on to how we were supposed to do the assessments, and there was more and more paperwork, and I didn't think I could handle it. I didn't feel like I could talk to my boss, and when nobody was around, I just packed up my desk and everything, and I walked out the door. I walked out and I went home, and that's how I quit my job. Now, I was kind of friends with a girl in another department, and they had her call me to figure out what happened. And the only way I can describe it is I don't know if it was autistic burnout at that point. I don't know. I called it a nervous breakdown because I didn't understand why I did what I did. And I'm sure it just really messed them up for days. I'm sure it made it hard for my coworkers who probably had to take up the slack and probably hated me. But I quit that job, and I felt like a huge failure. We ended up having to go bankrupt. We lost our house. We had to move into a double wide trailer on the property where my husband's family lives. And yeah, it is what it is. I've moved on from that. We're doing good now. I have a whole nother video on meltdowns at work if you want to see that. So the most recent kind of mini meltdown that I've had was at Christmas, and you might have saw the video on that where I'm really close to my parents, and my dad lives in Florida. And when I was told that he wouldn't be able to come see me for Christmas because I didn't get to see him for the last Christmas, so when I was told that, I was driving down the road, and I just broke out crying and just screaming, crying in my car. And I hung up on the person that told me that. And yeah, that was my last pretty much meltdown. But I've just been going through so much this last week with getting over COVID, and trying to communicate with my son successfully. And I guess
missing work, missing my routine. I guess it's just been too much to handle, and a meltdown.
Besides this past one where me and my husband got in an argument, I don't know, what was that, a month ago? And so we had argued the night before. I think me and my son had gotten an argument, and I just remember feeling emotionless. And I had a counseling appointment the next morning. So driving to work, my face felt like I couldn't move it. It felt so numb, like emotionless. Like I had to put the visor down. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want anybody to see me. And so I went to the counselor, and that was a blessing because she did help me through that emotions. But I'm sorry, I know all of this was just a big jumble. This was like a therapeutic session for me with all of you, this community of people that have joined my channel. And I appreciate every one of you and your comments. And this is for you. This is for you. This is so hopefully you can understand some of what you're going through as I'm trying to process what I'm going through. I hope this helps you. I did it for you. Because it is hard for me to talk about my feelings. I just usually don't. But if this can help one person, then it's worth it. I can't promise I don't delete this video, but I'm going to try. We'll see. I couldn't have made this video if people I know in my life right now were watching this. I probably would not have been able to make this video. So it's easier this way. Thank you for watching this video. If you made it to the end, oh my goodness, you were really interested in this topic or wanting understanding. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video where I'll probably be less emotional for sure. Bye.